All right, this one's a little simpler. Mel Gurry says, in your video, The Deadlift Prescription, you seem to downgrade the usefulness of hex bars.
Oh, the hex bar.
I was wondering why.
The hex bar thing, yeah.
All right, so I have a few ideas about this.
All right, let us have it. I gave you this question for a reason. I don't want to
Yeah.
answer this one again.
Okay, so I've got a couple points that should sum this up pretty simply. First, the starting position in a trap bar deadlift is very similar to the bottom of a squat, meaning your joint angles and the position of your body.
And the hips.
is very similar to the bottom position of a squat, which you should have already trained that day. And if that movement pattern has been trained thoroughly from squatting earlier, that makes the trap bar kind of redundant.
I think so.
Secondly, the handles on a trap bar are higher than the center of the plates, like a traditional bar would be, which means that you're not training a few more inches of range of motion towards the ground with a trap bar, which is a good range of motion to train for everybody. I mean, a deadlift is a specific movement, right, that is training that movement, sure, but lifting things nearly off of the ground is a good thing for most people to know how to do efficiently. So you're further degrading the quality of that movement. The third thing I'll say, and actually this is another one, the handles on a trap bar are set at a very specific distance, which means that if your body is not perfectly sized and shaped for that grip width and position, that bar is not designed for you. So if you're 14 years old, or you're a petite older woman, or you're a 400-pound strongman competitor, good luck. It may or may not be perfect for you, and you'll never be able to refine your position, your starting position, by an inch one way or the other. None of that is possible. Also, you can't, even for that same person that maybe it works perfectly for, you're not going to be able to do variations, deadlift variations, like maybe a snatch grip deadlift if you want to do that, or a sumo pull if you feel like doing that. It's not a very versatile piece of equipment. It's a one-trick pony, and it's a really bad pony. You know what I mean? So, so those are three. The fourth one I would say is if you're training heavy, which I would argue you should be, and when you stand up at the top of the movement, the bar is not contacting your body in any place. It's just floating around. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of that wiggliness.
At the top of the deadlift?
With
your
the
spine
heaviest
loaded.
single that you can handle.
Right.
For, let's say, this older population, to do every single time they come in the gym. That seems like you're playing Russian roulette every single day. That I'm not saying that a trap bar, I don't want to get misquoted here. I'm not saying that a trap bar is guaranteed to screw your back up, but I'm just saying that wiggliness seems reckless, maybe, theoretically, I guess that's the easiest way I can say that. Whereas a conventional bar is braced against your body.
You're going to get letters,
That's
man.
okay, I don't mind. But a conventional bar is braced against your body to keep it still and stable, which is just a safer way of applying a very intense stress to your body with let's say, a really heavy deadlift single. So a safer way to apply that stress to your body day in and day out when you didn't have quite enough sleep one day, not an ideal meal the next, you're a little stressed out with family life and work the next day, right? It's a little bit safer and more predictable of a movement. So those are my four ideas.
Yeah, people are passionate about this trap bar.
I don't know why.
I don't either, but anyway.
It's not the greatest thing.
I've never been like enthusiastic about it. If you want to see just how vehement and fanatical and religious people are about this, Ripto did a video called "The Trap Bar is Utterly Worthless" or something like that, And whoa, you should see the comment section. It's a dumpster fire. I actually don't think the trap bar is completely worthless. I think it has certain applications for rehab. For example, our dear friend Nikki Sims, right? She's been rehabbing a bad back injury, and for whatever reason, the back bar is very forgiving for her at the weights that she's trying to use it with right now. I haven't talked to her about this in detail, but like whatever, that's helping her. But I think your critique is right on. The standard deadlift is just it's a barbell. It's just incredibly versatile. A couple of things that I hadn't thought about in particular was the handle height. I've never really thought about that before. And you're absolutely right about the trap bar deadlift recapitulating something that's closer to the squat position than the standard deadlift position. And what's going on there is a more vertical back. Like whatever your back angle is on the standard deadlift, your back is more vertical and easier to hold together with it, right? And so what I've always...
What's the point of a deadlift?
What's the point is to hold your back together.
Is to learn how to
do that, right.
Set your back in that really uncomfortable bottom position.
Exactly.
Because it's not easy. I think that might be a reason why people like the trap bar better, because it's an easier bottom position to get into. And fair enough if you're rehabbing some issue with your back that gets irritated in those last couple inches, that might be a reason to use it. Or if you're obese and it's like a large belly and it's very difficult to get down to that position.
If you've got some sort of deficiency and it just works
short
better
arms,
for you.
long torso, right? But I would argue that if that was the case, I would still try risers with a conventional deadlift bar.
What we do.
First, at least, because again, the point of the deadlift, so that it's not redundant with the squat, is to train your back better, right? The squat trains your back, but it doesn't...
not like the deadlift.
It doesn't, you're not setting your back the way that you do in the deadlift. And I think that that's the value of a deadlift.
The whole point of the deadlift is, more than any other exercise, it specifically trains you to transform your back from a force absorber to a force transmitter. And that has applications in the squat and the press and, and in everyday life. Yeah. And then the other point that you made that I thought was really excellent, again, which I kind of hadn't really thought of specifically that way, is the conjugate movements, right? So, like, for example, just last week, I did snatch grip deadlifts. That was my conjugate movement for light deadlift day, right? And we do rack pulls and we do halting deadlifts and things like that. And
can't do all those.
You can't do all those things. So
a trap bar reminds me of a Nautilus machine circuit, like selectorized circuits, where if there's a series of cams that move a metal arm through a very specific range of motion and a very specific vector, and if you don't like it, tough. I don't like that. Whereas a conventional bar has possibilities. It's a tool that can be used in many different ways.
From time to time, we have to put the bar up on a riser for somebody who's like obese or very arthritic or something like that. Mm-hmm. From time to time, we have to take somebody out of their shoes because, like, John Dieters comes to mind. He's got that like Viking, lanky, Scandinavian, phenotype, and it's just really hard for those people to get their hips even a little lower than their head, right? Okay, but that all being said, we've never had to put anybody in a trap bar yet. No. Like, have we ever had anybody in this gym who couldn't do some version of a deadlift with a standard bar? I don't think we have.
No.
And let me ask you this. Has it ever been the case, in your experience, where somebody comes in and said, I did so much weight with a trap bar deadlift and turned out to be able to lift more with a standard deadlift?
What do you mean?
So somebody comes in and says, yeah, man, I maxed out at 315 on a trap bar deadlift, right? And then you give them 315 on a standard bar deadlift, what happens? Most of the time they can't do it. Right?
Sure. Well, and
or they can't do it with good form.
I think part of that reason is because they haven't trained that extra couple inches of range of motion, right? Which means they haven't practiced setting their back
at that angle,
in that more extreme position either.
Trap bars, if you want to use them, if that's your thing, if you're really like dead set against doing a deadlift with straight bar, I'd rather have you do trap bar deadlift than nothing. We're not religious about it. This wasn't meant to be a polemic against the trap bar. Oh, it's totally useless. I think I think that position's a little bit extreme. We just don't need to spend the money and take up the extra floor space with another bar. We find that we get the job done with standard deadlifts.
All of this equipment is just a human invention, right? So some inventions are more versatile than other ones, in our opinion, in your opinion, in my opinion. Use what you want.
Next question is from Rod Hargrave. He says he just had a posterior vitreous detachment, and I have 2 clients who have the same thing. We are all well over 60 years old. It's common. I have one. The question is, does the Valsalva maneuver increase pressure in the eye or increase blood pressure to the eye when lifting heavy? Yes, we know that it does. Whether that increases the incidence of posterior vitreous detachment, we don't know. I've searched the internet and there are mixed opinions on this. That's right, because nobody knows. My eye specialist said it doesn't. He doesn't know either. I mean, I'm glad he's not an alarmist about it, but he doesn't know. We don't know, right? We just don't know. What we do know is that the older you get, the more common posterior vitreous detachment is. Maybe we'll put up a little picture for you guys to show you what that is. Basically, it just means that the goop inside your eyeball is coming off the retina, and now there's nothing really to secure it down. We'll try and do a lit review on this someday, but in the past when I've looked at this literature, again, I've been confused. There's just nothing dispositive there. The answer will be the same when we do that. We don't know. I have several clients training post PVD surgery, post macular hole surgery, et cetera, and the biggest problem with that is not the surgery or the complications from lifting, it's the prolonged immobility that we see that people are subjected to after these kinds of surgeries. And I have a real bone to pick with that, because one thing that we do know, in part like from big reviews like the Cochrane review of this, is that prolonged immobility for average size macular holes and PVD and things like that, prolonged immobility after those kinds of surgical procedures, it's not protective, and all it does is impose an additional injury on somebody over 50. So we had a client who was immobilized on her belly for 2 weeks after this surgery, and it took us 2 years to get her squat back because her hip was so immobile when she finally came back to the gym, so immobile and so stiff and so scarred down. It took us 2 years to open up her hips and get her back to, I'm talking about Val, right? So she's in her 70s, and she's got like she had a 125 pound squat, something like that, and she's a tiny thing, just ruined, right? And through an act of incredible discipline and courage, she's managed to get her squat back up to around 110. Immobility is injury. That's a little bit off topic, but the short answer is, yeah, good job, Val. We don't know. Next.
The only thing that I could say to that, and this is a little difficult to describe, but some lifters, when doing the Valsalva, tend to force more pressure up into their head.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe that.
They do that. Yeah, the pressure, remember, the whole point of doing the
sure
Valsalva...
you guys can understand what I mean by that, right? Of forcing up into your head. And that can increase the pressure in your eyes more.
And in your head.
Right, which doesn't help.
It doesn't help. I'm not sure that it hurts at all, but it totally misses the point.
So I used to do that in the squat. You remember the day that I was in here with you and a few other people, and my vision clouded after I squatted?
Because you were...
It was like the room was full of steam for 30 minutes or so. And I had that happen to me multiple times on and off for like a 2 or 3 month period. And so I went home and just, there's a little bit of information about this on the internet, but I tried to just think about what exactly was happening. And I realized that I was sort of forcing a bit too much up into my head instead of forcing down with the Valsalva, which is the point.
It's
That's really what you want to do.
Thoracoabdominal pressure.
Sort of pushing down more.
Exactly.
And I've noticed that since I started doing that, I haven't had one of those episodes again. So maybe that would help reduce it. That's about